The House in committee is considering the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill. We're just about to commence debate on Clause 2, the commencement, a very narrow debate. Is some member seeking the call? Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yes, this is the commencement clause number 2 of the Parana Park Land Vesting Bill, the Hamilton City Council Parana Park Land Vesting Bill. And what the commencement clause says is that the Act comes into force on the day after the date on which it receives royal assent. Seems pretty straightforward, but we've already had quite a bit of debate already just on the title clause about what year this bill is actually coming in on. Is it 2010 or is it 2011? And I would well imagine that when we talk about the commencement, that it surely might be 2011, the date on which it receives the royal assent. Although Mr Okenvold was offering the view before that it might be 2012. He was offering the view before that it may well be 2012 before we get to the commencement of this particular bill. But look, I do think it is important that we do get to the commencement of it, because we do actually have the luxury in Hamilton. And Mr Chair, I do just want to take a departure from, I guess, what has been at times a jocular debate this evening, to say that at least in Hamilton we have the privilege to talk about this piece of land and not have to think about its destruction or think about the things that people in Canterbury will be having to now think about very seriously about it. Every single piece of public... well, I'm sorry that the junior whip from the government doesn't allow me the opportunity, as this is one of the first times that I've been on my feet since the Christchurch earthquake, to actually offer my condolences to the people of Canterbury and of Christchurch for what has occurred. And I'm sorry that she finds that offensive, but I will take the opportunity to actually say that to the people of Christchurch, because while we're talking about the commencement date of something that's fairly minor, in fact, for our city, and I know I've kind of in a jocular way have said before that this must be the pinnacle of David Bennett's career and perhaps Tim McIndoe's. Actually, while it's great for the Hamilton City Council to bring this forward, in the grand scheme of things, with what this Parliament ought to be dealing with and the things that the government has got ahead of it at the moment, this is very, very minor in the grand scheme of things. It's very, very minor, and so why am I dragging it out? Well, no. Well, if the two members have stopped their interjection with each other, I will continue, because I think this is the committee stages, Mr McIndoe, of a piece of legislation where the Select Committee actually overlooked the fact that it had the wrong date in the title clause. And if we weren't giving proper scrutiny to every single clause of this bill, as at least the opposition is prepared to do, then that would not have been picked up. And so that is the role of this Parliament, to actually give decent scrutiny to pieces of legislation like this, unlike what the government's prepared to do with another piece of legislation that talks about vesting land, rushing it through a Select Committee process and also rushing it through its processes in the House. And there's the government complaining because the opposition dares to give the proper scrutiny that is supposed to be happening in the committee stages of the House to this piece of legislation. Well, I don't apologise for that at all, Mr McIndoe, because I think that's actually the job of parliamentarians, to give proper scrutiny to pieces of legislation as they go through. Well, Mr Bridges has just said so righteous. Well, look... Well, good question. Great question from Mr Bridges. If it wasn't for the opposition, where would democracy be in this House, quite frankly? If it wasn't for the Labour opposition actually calling for democracy and proper process, I think it's an absolutely appropriate question that Mr Bridges does ask about this. Well, has to start somewhere, Mr Bridges, because it certainly isn't happening with much of the legislation that this government's putting through when it comes to talking about vesting land and who owns the interests of land around this country. I think it is actually quite useful that we are actually giving proper scrutiny to this bill, because that certainly isn't happening with the Coastal Marine Bill, and we need to see about state assets.
Mr Chairman.